Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here, Mary.
Yes, I'm excited to finally have this conversation.
Me as well.
Yeah, and all the pre-conversations we had could have been podcast conversations, but let's start now for the audience.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yes, and let's start at the beginning. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And I assume you do.
I do, and I embrace it now. I think when I started, um, it's probably been about 12 years. And it was in the context of working at Autodesk and being there at a interesting moment when uh, we were global teams trying to work in very distributed ways, and also when Luma Institute was brought in as a common language. And so
Mm.
up to that point, I'd been in design for 30 plus year, 35 years or something. It was graphic design, and then it was UX design and CD-ROM, authoring, all that kind of stuff. So I had picked up methods along the way from researchers that would take the time to work with me and show me hard sorting or, string words or, various things. But I never felt like I really knew what I was doing. I was just trying stuff and experimenting. But I had a manager at Autodesk that saw the potential I had to be empathetic, read a room, all of that stuff that were kind of the
Mm.
latent skills that we know we lean on, and directed me into a couple situations where teams needed to be facilitated. Like they were not getting along, they were not empathizing, they had entrenched in certain positions, and it just was hampering progress. And
Mm.
so going through a couple of those trial by fire experiences, um, very nerve-wracking, but successful. Like at the end, the two teams were actually advocating for each other's outcomes, which was remarkable.
Yeah.
And then learning a little bit, Luma for me was this moment where a couple things happened. One, um, introduced to a nice tidy set of methods, almost like that the handy toolkit every homeowner should have with a screwdriver and a hammer. It's like here are the basic tools. There are more exotic tools if you want them, but these are the one. And it was in that journey where I felt I had tools at my disposal, and that gave me the biggest insight, which
Mm.
which was freedom from certainty. So
Mm.
you have to be, if you're a designer, you're hired with the answers. You're the one that's going to come in and draw the pictures about how things should be. And that's nerve-wracking and silly because you can't be an expert in it. And that was that shift for me where I realized I actually don't have to be an expert in the expertise exists in the room,
Yeah.
and it's drawing out all of that latent genius, the quiet voices that could find a way to get their things out into the open, the loud voices find a way to attenuate their volume down a little bit through mechanisms like sticky notes, and it was through that craft development that I think I felt like I really started my
Mm.
journey, and I've been a student of it ever since. I mean,
It never
it felt
stops, right?
like,
First the outer work, then the inner work. And I, what you described remind me of earlier podcast guest Arne, and he said he also came from design, and he said he discovered that he didn't want to be in the solution space, but he wanted to be in the problem space.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
very similar to what you described. And I'm very, I have so many questions popping up in my mind, starting with what happened back then where you were able, without these tools, to align teams? So, what kind of, and this brings me to what is the intuition that is maybe inherent to any facilitator where they start?
Yeah. Well, so my My mother was an educator. She was in kind of primary school education, but she helped develop curriculum and things. And she would never give me the answer. She would coach me in finding that answer. And
Lucky you.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the
Beautiful
time, it's
upbringing.
frustrating.
Yeah.
Your homework takes longer, your report takes longer to write, but when you actually engage and do the work
Mm,
and you realize you make also that mental shift with this is not a parent making life hard for you. This is a resource that knows a lot more than you do and is setting up a progressive set of challenges and believes in you that you can rise to that challenge. That, I mean, so much of my parenting comes from being parented well. I mean,
mm,
that's the real gift.
yeah.
So in that context, the ability to shift into a beginner's mind, to have empathy. And the first part of my design career, I found myself often early technical adopter. Like I was
Mhm,
always in the Silicon Valley when all of that was happening in the 80s and 90s. Um, I just had access to it, and I had friends that were also on that edge trying to figure stuff out. So would be brought into a company that says, well, we got this new fancy scanner or something, and we don't know how to use it. And so I would always start with fundamental, who owns a camera?
mm,
Ground it in something they know. Okay, well, this is what's happening. And not just hit this button, do this thing, punch these numbers in this thing, but give them that context
yeah.
because I wanted them to be able to troubleshoot or take everything that I knew and do more amazing stuff because there are always people who you can see their amazing talent and skill. They're just stuck on this little thing that you happen to know something about. So it becomes about getting them unstuck and then reveling in what they go on to do. And that seems to be something that just translated very smoothly
Mm,
into a role of facilitator.
beautiful. I can see this, yeah, emerging. Thank you for sharing this context. And then you said you used the word you embraced being a facilitator eventually. What made the shift?
Well, one at Autodesk, when I was presented with these challenges, I was also introduced to people who were already calling themselves facilitators. And I was able to see them really control a room. You know how you walk into a space and the first thing is you look around and we're going to have 20 people, we're going to do breakouts. This table arrangement will not work. So people that seem to move into a space with authority and change things and put things up and create that space, that for me was way outside my box.
Mm,
And so embracing facilitation was a series of being put in a situation where I was doing it, internally honoring people that I knew were far better that were further along in a journey of facilitation than I was. And it was eventually getting enough confidence where I felt I wasn't doing any harm. If you asked me to facilitate, I would make more progress than I would harm in a situation.
yeah.
And that's where the shift started. And I also embraced it because I wanted to do more of that. So the title became a way for me to communicate or start a conversation. Yes, I've managed user experience teams. Yes, I've done user research and I've done these are things I've done, but I also facilitate. And sometimes people go, what is that? And then you're able to, after you get a couple of these under your belt, you're able to talk and reflect and say, well, there's a situation with these two teams. We were able to do this. There's a situation with an overwhelming backlog, and teams needed to understand where to focus. And so, and what do you do? Do you tell them where to focus? No, I help them frame and ask more interesting questions. And I coach them. You're either a conductor, coach, or a catalyst, right? That was another kind of mental
Mm.
framework that someone shared with me. And sometimes you were telling everyone what to do. You're moving the stuff around the room. Sometimes you're a coach. You're not on the field. You're shouting suggestions at people who really have to move the ball around or get certain outcomes. And sometimes you're a catalyst. You're just creating a reaction. You're just trying to put energy into the space. And as you go on the journey, you realize that actually sometimes takes energy out of you. So getting excited and saying, I'm doing 3 workshops back to back without any downtime, like that's the other side of it where you realize there is an energy exchange and you need the inner work, right? You do the outer work, you're enamored with the stuff that happens in the space, but then you need to be kind to yourself too and understand what it takes to do that job.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I just imagine as if holding space, that space really had a weight. So it's like weightlifting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think about I think about all the times I went in worried about me, where
Mm.
the energy was on me. Is my collar right? Do I have anything in my teeth? Just like, and those sessions went very poorly. When all of your attention and focus is on how will I look? What will I do? How will I come across? Will they be suitably impressed with me that they'll ask me to come back and keep paying me or what, all of that, in that headspace. But when you walk in and your energy is out in that audience, and as everyone's putting butter on their bagel or grabbing a donut before things get started, you're asking about them. Oh, you've got a dog. What kind? Oh, that's great. Oh, I know, oh, you've been to Scotland recently. You start understanding who's in the room, and maybe you use some methods to draw that out for each other so they benefit as well. And when you are able to lean in, it's you sometimes it's feel like you got a bungee cord on, you're leaning over the side of the building, and you find out that that audience is with you. They're just with you. They don't know where we're going. They're not so sure, but they're at least willing and open. The dynamics are fundamentally different.
Yeah. And it reminds me, so it's funny, the bird in your background is also leaning in
That's
or bungee jumping. um,
right.
uh, it reminds me of the importance of confidence and courage as a facilitator, and the concept of that we first need to feel safe ourselves. And what you describe, I think it's so common to all beginner facilitators. Oh, what will they think of me? And I think our power starts to play out the moment we stop caring whether we have something in our teeth or not. And if we have something between our teeth, maybe it's even better because it will make them feel comfortable to have something between their teeth.
Absolutely.
And because it is this charisma that comes from the confidence that we know what we are doing that makes you step into the room and people trusting you and the process.
That's right.
Because
That's
if
right.
you don't have that, they won't.
That's right. In fact, that was probably one of the most concentrated arcs of learning about facilitation was after leaving Autodesk. It took a little over a year, but I became a certified lead instructor with Luma. So I was at Autodesk a customer of Luma, and I reached out, and it wasn't very common, but they accepted me. I had an endorsement from some other instructors, Luma instructors I'd worked with, and I still carry with me a red journal. I've got it within arm's reach here in the room somewhere. But that was the journal anytime I was scheduled to co-teach with another Luma instructor where I was taking notes. and learning of the dynamic range. And that's where I learned, to your point, sometimes instructors would intentionally misspell something when doing their chart, or like the spinach in the teeth or something. They'd have an intentional flaw, not to be fake, but to introduce or not be concerned if they did misspell something and just move on and then call it out and go, I messed that up. But you get it. And you realize that that authenticity is fundamental to whatever's going to happen in that room. And it starts before you walk into that room with the intention you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Falling in love with the participants.
Yeah. Uh,
And I think I love the intentionality. I love the manipulative bit in it. And I believe that facilitators are manipulators, right? Because when we create a process, we manipulate them into a certain direction. Um, because I came to realize that nobody likes people who are perfect. We all want to be perfect ourselves, but nobody wants someone perfect in front of them because it just reminds of our own imperfections. So a facilitator who just makes themselves a little bit more human. And if they happen to be close to perfect, yeah, then they have to put some spinach into their teeth.
that's right. Well, the you know the ability to again to bring that authenticity in, and you're manipulating the audience, but you're trying to create circumstances where they can surprise themselves,
Yes.
or they can experience a little step on the journey. Um, because I've never lost track of. I oftentimes, when I'm meditating, I can go all the way back to sixth grade, eighth grade, and just walk forward and go, yeah, it was this thing that I was interested at that age, and I read this book, and I met that person, and they introduced me to that person. You can just see it's not it, it's not an inborn natural gift. It's the curiosity that you nurture along the way. So if anything, just encouraging people to embrace curiosity immediately, even if it doesn't have a purpose, even if it doesn't have a
Mm,
dollar sign attached to it. Be curious about things, because that's how you can empathize with people that do things that's also how you can see patterns between things. And that also builds that confidence when you're in the room, where you will find common ground. The more curious you are, the more common ground you will able to find, even with the really tricky participants, or the tricky clients, or the
yes.
um,
And I think because you cannot be curious and judgmental at the same time, this cannot coexist in the brain. And the curiosity, there's a certain humility in curiosity because it means that we're asking questions, which means that we admit that we don't know, so we are willing to learn. Um, and everyone likes to be asked questions and to talk about themselves. The questions are not kind of teacher testing questions, but facilitative questions. And I wonder, so we set up this conversation to talk about tech and AI. And I think that for me, that's a beautiful bridge because I just wonder to what extent is the AI revolution actually killing this curiosity, or might be actually um, distracting from the curiosity because it at your fingertips you have the easy solution. So all the and I guess Mural also has an AI tool for sure where you can just create ideas
right.
instead of generating them yourself. Um, Creating questions instead of thinking about them yourself. So,
Yeah,
where,
this is, well, I can share my current mindset, or my current way of looking at things are moving very quickly. And on one hand, I'm looking at the technology itself. On the other hand, I'm looking where humans are using the technology and what about that and where is it benefiting and where is it running into problems. Ambiently curious about what's happening in terms of um, lawsuits and legalities because those things often inform the shape or the direction or the amount of latitude a technology might have. So just being aware of how things are spinning up in that. The European Union just recently kind of creating an accord, which I think Mural was one of the first folks to sign on because we have many customers that are in European Union and that's important to us as well. They're not only an important constituency, I think in many ways, uh, EU has been very forward thinking. The right to be forgotten, data privacy, all these kind of things, I think are they're taking it seriously. Whereas in the United States, it can feel more like you're in a petri dish at the whim of big tech. That's
Mhm.
might be controversial, but but it has you don't have to point too far to find news articles where biometrics and stuff are singling people out trying to get into concerts with their kids and they're on the law team that it's like you just look around and go, yeah, we're in a petri dish here, but there are other countries that are taking it seriously, certain
Mhm.
things. So where I'm where I'm seeing some opportunities now is the AI um, technology that is manifesting itself in Mural or with chatbots and ChatGPT and various different models are very compelling. And because I was around long enough to live before calculators and then calculators showed up, and then teachers being very concerned that you were sneaking calculators into. So I think the same type of concern exists. It's just, are you understanding and appreciating the technology at a level where you can be discerning about where it's helping? Can you even tell where it's helping or where it's hurting?
Mhm. Yeah.
If you're um, dealing with mechanical things, like if you're in a machine shop
Mhm.
and you don't respect, a 4-ton lathe that can spin a 200-pound piece of steel, it will school you in the respect you need to give that thing. And technology is a little more ethereal. Like
Mhm.
you won't know right away if you blindly lean into it, whether it's helping or hurting. So, um, so the way I'm looking at it is I'm encouraging people that are looking at adopting AI in their practice to really be present in what you're doing
Mhm.
because there are certain and share knowledge. If you find a way that a process that involves AI is accelerating, is creating conditions where it's helping your creativity, your imagination, it's helping you um, process very
Mhm.
dense information in a way where you're able to understand the question, ask better questions, and understand the question, then definitely share that with your community because there are things that can be successful. And you say, well, if AI can do this, then it should be able to do that.
Mhm.
And it doesn't. And that's
Mhm.
the jagged frontier.
Yeah.
There's a recent Harvard paper on that, the jagged frontier. So we have to be engaged in observing and sharing and looking at where it benefits
Yeah.
and yeah.
I I totally agree. And something that just crossed my mind as I listened to you was that the value of ideas, I think, is decreasing. It's like an inflation, right? The AI can create so many ideas, many more ideas than we do, so that the real value is actually in the question. And I think I remember when I was at the uni I remember the moment where my classmate said, "Have you heard of Google?" I was like, "Oh, how do you spell that?" Oh, interesting. And so the first thing that I taught to my students then is to how to actually Google. So if you're putting the wrong search into the machine, you get the wrong answers. And I think nowadays it's what questions are you asking to AI to generate the ideas that you need? And if you're asking the wrong questions, you won't get far.
Yeah.
And I think this is then maybe a real beautiful opportunity to actually learn and teach to ask better questions, something you grew up with, but I think many don't.
Yeah, being being curious in a lot of different fields and maintaining your human connections, I think is very important because and also getting away from technology and being in, I say nature, but it just like breathe air from outside, not inside the building. Um, look at a bird in real life, not only on TV, or just as an icon, a tweet icon or something. It's like really you need to have you have a physical body and it has natural rhythms. And so for everything for loneliness to burnout, all these things are denying those rhythms. And not only do you need a break, but you also need the influence. We need to remind ourselves, like the pandemic, we forgot how to do small talk, right? Like in a social set. We
Yeah.
forgot how, oh, suddenly we're getting together with someone for dinner. And unless you're very good friends with them, but if it's a crowd there, I found I used to be able to just fire up a conversation and have it, and I got rusty. So I think there's this in all things, there's that the way you practice it. But I think that's what you carry in with a set of expectations
Mm.
about asking the right question and evaluating, almost like judging AI, like not like, is this useful as opposed to
Yes.
blindly taking the output. And um, I did a workshop recently where I illustrated two extremes. And one of them was, let's say you had asked 10 customers to generate 3 to 5 sticky notes on feedback on a recent project. And then you needed to synthesize that and make some type of executive recommendation.
Mhm.
Well, how would we do this as a facilitator using methods? And I laid out a plan where we'd probably use rose thorn butter, something to get ideas out of our head, an affinity cluster, and then we'd visualize the vote. We might do a round robin to exchange ideas, and I said, well, this agenda is, we're 4 hours in, and we haven't gotten to the executive recommendations part, but the humans have all come along on the journey.
Mhm.
And then I said, well, here, and I scooted down in the mural and I go, so I have laid out 10 fictitious people with notes. I go, we could select them. We could say sort by sentiment. So the positive sentiments are green, the negative sentiments are red. Said, I cluster these, I clustered them. I asked the AI bot text. We have a AI panel, so you have a chat capability right there. I said, so summarize this for me. It summarized it. I said, what executive recommendations would you give? And it spat them all out. And then I went and found a free AI PowerPoint generator tool online. And in another 5 minutes, I had just grabbed that text, thrown it in, and had this really ugly looking but PowerPoint deck. And I said, that took about 15 minutes. And I've gone from thank you, customers, you can go away now to a slide deck versus 4 hours. And I'm not really quite done yet. But, and everyone's kind of seeing where this is going. Would you put that slide? No, of course not. You would put that slide. It's embarrassing. It's full of holes. You don't even know what's in it.
Yeah.
You don't even know what recommendations you're giving. And I think that helped illustrate a point where it's very compelling. And at the executive level and the boardroom level, if you're all about profit, it's a really compelling argument to say, well, this easy stuff, we could just replace that with AI. But then where are the people that learn the business that have that journey and understand the customers? So you're shortchanging your future skills gap. Um,
Yeah.
these are the things that occupy my brain right now.
Beautiful example. Oh, I wish I was in this workshop. This sounds like
The
perfect
Miro,
food for conversation.
yeah,
Um, and it sounds almost as if there's the trap of growing the wrong muscle. Because then it's for me, it's also the question, where does it stop?
right.
So yes, we get you. Ah, yes, maybe we can use it to generate ideas. Oh, then maybe we can also use it to cluster the ideas. And then, as you say, what it doesn't help is to have these difficult conversations to actually get the heart involved, um, and
Um,
get everyone along.
if if your journey started with the appreciation of I don't have to have the answers, but the answers exist in the room of humans,
Hmm.
then I think it becomes clearer if you've had that experience of a team that was really struggling and their morale was very low and they had maybe just failed in a fairly significant way and then you see through creating those conditions where not only do they heal as a team, but they come back and they actually become a model for other teams to say, wow, what are they doing? How are they going about their business? We want to be like them. And then you see this situations where the engagement's very low and they just acquiesce and they're saying, well, AI will just, we'll just lean on that. And I'm so busy, I'm overworked anyway, I've got so many projects. So now you're just doing shallower and shallower work. There's less and less of your human cognition into more and more
Yeah,
projects. And that doesn't bode well.
yeah. And it reminds me of a book that I read this summer and it really changed my perspective. Cal Newport's Slow Productivity,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is,
that's the audiobook I'm listening to right now.
isn't
Yeah.
it amazing?
Yeah.
Do less work at a natural pace and be obsessed with quality. And it's basically exactly opposite of what you just described with, oh, so busy, let's cramp more work in. Then we are so busy that we don't even realize that we are doing the wrong work.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then too fast, and then it gets sloppy and we lose the quality. Yeah.
And then being human, you you can get into a pretty big funk because your work isn't, you've lost your heart and your head is not in your work anymore. You're not proud of what you're showing. You're not setting yourself up to be forever employable because this isn't, what are you what are you learning? Where is your growth? Where is your ability to engage and improve? Just it spreads so thin, becomes a little
Yeah.
meaning.
Bringing
Yeah.
it back to the purpose, why do we do what we do and why do we work? And if we're not doing the work, then why? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I would be very curious from how I perceive you and how you reflect on facilitation and the work. It's very human centered. It's very about the interaction, bringing the human side, the heart, to the space. You talked about the woods. And I would be curious, how do you bring that human side to online media or how do you combine the human side and the tech? And where can they be collaborators and reinforcing each other? And where is the big trap of distraction? Because I remember during the pandemic, I was a fan of your, what was it called? It wasn't behind the scene. Um,
Backstage pass.
Backstage, where you facilitated in front of what, hundreds of people who were observing, you facilitating a workshop and showing how mural works with Heather?
That was a magic accident. That was and that was some of the most enjoyable work I got to do. And and got to do it with some really talented people. But the notion there was, well, whiteboards are a new thing. Digital whiteboards are a new thing. Facilitation's a new thing to a lot of people. Methods are new. There's all this new stuff, and we're before the pandemic, we were kind of vitamins. These are things you should be. These are skills you should be developing. This is part of future of work, and people would, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I go into an office, I don't need that stuff. Well, the pandemic happened, and our life, my life, forever changed. Um, But in that moment, we realized there are way too many questions that people have.
Mhm.
And there's they don't have the time to go do an LMS learning course or a LinkedIn learning or like they have questions, they don't know where to start. So it was starting with a blank canvas and opening it up, like also figuring out like this Zoom and the technology as it comes together. Well, you can have an open-ended invite as many people as you want, but in Zoom, you can also promote people to be panelists
Mhm.
or promote them to be co-hosts or something. There's some mechanism.
Yeah.
And so we had this wonderful learning of a hybrid experience where some of the public learn by doing. And so they'd raise their hand or say, pick me in the chat, and we just promote a couple people and they join us in the mural. And the rest of the people were either eating their lunch or we're just, we're more like wanting to sit back, and they learn by watching, kind of the YouTube approach, show me what's going on. And it brought this community together on a regular basis that where the going from a blank canvas to stumbling into the first question. Someone's, what problem are we trying to solve? Well, I've got to run a weekly team meeting. And then the questions start showing up. How many people? Are they all in the same time zone? And so in real time, we were also able to observe what are the
Mhm.
common questions that everyone has that they have to solve, and what are these things? And then we would just start building it. And week after week, there was an audience that would show up. And I tell you, on several occasions, someone that had been watching for a long time suddenly raises their hand, says, I have something you might be interested in. And I remember this was long before the current discussions of AI and Mid-Journey and all the visual stuff that was going on. Is someone who had access to so IBM's large artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
And he said, well, you might be interested in this. And he showed, here's a workshop I did. Here's everyone's sentiment. I fed this into Watson. I was able to generate this stuff and dump it back into Mural. And my jaw hit the floor because I'd just been in several internal meetings where we were thinking about, well, what would it mean if we were able to access this type of technology? And here's someone who's been watching for months who just gives a roadmap to like, here's what's possible. That was very, a very magic thing. And we've my colleague Jim Callback and I have been noodling on how do we revive that, because I think
Mhm.
there's a whole new wave and opportunity to create and hold
Yeah.
that space.
Yeah. And I think it's beautiful to hear how you really created the space that everyone who, so basically it was, as you said, hybrid, but in terms of personalities and learning types, and that everyone could step in. And now I also understand why it was so compelling to watch, because basically our peers were suddenly on stage and we could
That's right.
learn from them and they would ask questions on our behalf.
Right.
And so what have you learned from this experience, or maybe in general at your time at Mural, that it takes to really bring this humanness into the digital space? Because I'm a big fan of online facilitation. I wouldn't go back into the space. Since the pandemic, I'm like, oh, that's perfect for me. I have the
So,
breakout button and the mute button, all I need. And it
uh,
is a real skill to have this human side there.
well, it's interesting. I spent a lot of time thinking about this because I wouldn't trade the beginning of my journey in person, in rooms with people for anything. I mean, that was that was incredibly valuable. And I still can go back and remember moments that were really joyful, amazing, and you're there seeing the team get excited or have that breakthrough. And and you're in the space, and then you go out for, for a glass of wine or dinner afterward. I mean, it's like,
That's
okay,
the real charming thing.
that's exactly. So
It's all
that,
about the food and the booze.
right, it's all about the camaraderie
Yeah.
outside. But um, and now being thrust completely to the other side, there are other benefits that can't happen when you're forced to travel and be co-located. You can have a much broader group. You can break conversations down into smaller conversations, right? You don't have to have the theatrics of a 3-day workshop where you better hope your agenda's right, because if it isn't, you're not getting sleep the first night as you're rejiggering everything and redoing all your reprinting stuff out. So you can actually more get back into that rhythm, the human rhythm. And I think that's where there are some opportunities exist with digital is able to hold the state of things, right? In a digital artifact, it's not going to get erased off the whiteboard, or it's not going to, your 3M
It's
sheets are
falling
not
off the wall.
going to, right? It can just remember exactly where you were. And it can also benefit people that are slow thinkers like me. Like, there are people that want to make the decision. They're right there. They're very sharp. My partner's that way, always processing and able to move very quickly. Um, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I was on the bus going home from school 3 hours later going, oh, that's what I should have said to the bully. That's what I should have, that's the witty comeback, right? But in breaking it up and using the technology as a way to bring people together from anywhere, even if they're traveling or they're not in their home studio, you can bring them together, and then you give some time to be thoughtful or some asynchronous work to happen. And when you come back together, I'm finding that there are true benefits where the technology supports synchronous and asynchronous. And then if you do have the good fortune to have a hybrid where some people are coming together, well, it's all there too. And you're not going back to the days of someone's webcam pointed aimlessly at the ceiling and they've muted the polycom and you're yelling and they can't, you've forgotten. If you're not in the room, you're
Right.
forgotten. So I think there's the benefits exist in using the technology in a way where that is your common where you work,
Mm.
and avail yourself of these structures, learning how to run a method, use templates, pull things out of templates you see that work well. Borrow warm-up exercises that you think work well culturally or with the groups, and cobble together things. Don't be afraid to try new things. And I think that's another opportunity is you've got version one, and when you go to version 1.5, you can say, I'm going to try something. I'm going to try doing this in a different order. I'm going to see. And you know that most of what you're doing, you still have that scaffolding that
Mm.
helps you get from point A to point B for your customer or team. But it allows you to be continually iterating, and the technology can also help you do that. Try and bring an AI into a moment of idea generation and just see what happens, and try it more than once, because some teams may have a fabulous experience, but you might run into another team where it doesn't go so well. And then as a facilitator, you're back in that learning journey.
Mm.
Why did it work there? Why didn't it work there? How can I create conditions where it works more of the time?
Yeah.
What did I not know? You know?
And I'm just thinking of linking it back to something we mentioned earlier about the creativity and just using the shortcut of having AI creating ideas and the curiosity. And I can perfectly imagine the situation where two actually use cases. One, that ideas created by AI might actually increase the curiosity because like, oh, what does it come up with? Does it make sense or not? And then as a second stage, discussing about neutral ideas, objective, because nobody had them. It's so they can be very critical, um, and everyone can really choose their own opinion, independent of roles, hierarchies, maybe different camps.
Yeah,
And
there's well, you've conjured some things in my head that that I think are the next wave of all this is when we're moving beyond a general large language model that is trained and is a service that kind of everyone points to. And when you're able to train adjacent models that can be more expert or more aware of a specific domain. You know, if um, if your company deals with evolving energy knowledge, or you're in finance or medical, there are ways where you can start really developing trustworthy, specialized repositories, and then repositories that are built on your own company information as well. And this is where my head can see the bright, sunny rainbow unicorn future and the horrible dystopian future simultaneously. And I'm like, so this is why humans need to be engaged. But imagine if you had the ability to ask interesting questions of an AI that knew every historical project the company had worked on, knew what the progress was happening in different contractors and subcontractors around the company, and could almost be like you if you're familiar with Wodehouse and Jeeves and Wooster. I don't know if you're familiar with
yeah.
a British. Jeeves was a butler, and he seemed to know everything, and he seemed to know what was going on in the village. And Wooster was kind of a buffoon, upper upper class kind of buffoon that had a big heart, but really didn't know how to do anything. And Jeeves was the one that would just happen to know what was going on at the rectory down the thing, and this party's here, and these people know each other, and just had this innate awareness of
Mhm.
so much fact that he would be able to, string together a sequence of events where things magically seem to turn out right in the end.
Mhm.
And so when I think about the ability to be asking these questions and have responses that are not just saving you time from searching on Wikipedia, saving you time from going to Google and reading a bunch of articles that anyone can read, but starts pulling in information about a project that kicked off last week in Germany that you have no idea of, and says, oh, and by the way, here's the person leading it, and here's a summary. And would you like to watch this synopsis of it? And
Yeah, like a real knowledge hub,
yes,
which
yes,
would then also empower people to share the knowledge and build on each other. And I think solve a big problem of bottlenecks
you get back
and
to
silos. And there it could actually be beneficial because we often have these silos who wouldn't communicate with each other because everything is difficult. And then suddenly, if they can access each other's information, which might then not help the silos, but at least the
right.
work process, always pros and cons.
It is, and that's why again I get back to you have to be an active participant in it.
Mm,
The and that craft of like statement starters, really crafting those challenge statements when you're facilitating. It's got to be something that grabs your head and your heart and
mm.
is a little bit of a moonshot. It's like, but that's worth doing. It's like it gets back into those are the methods you can explain in 2 minutes, but they take years to get good at.
Yes, like a
Uh,
good one, two for all.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. I think
And
there's
mm,
opportunity. We need to be actively engaged in helping steer and show AI would
yeah,
be useful if, but if it does these things for these people in these situations. I think. as opposed
Exactly.
to,
And then be very mindful on how to promote it and to use it because I can also see how suddenly everything becomes very protective because if everything goes into this AI machine, then oh, who has to sign off the documents so that we are not accessing the wrong information
right.
and
Yeah.
it can manipulate.
And and you have to be aware of consulting. I think is on the rise. I think as
Really?
you know, well, I would say there's more opportunities for people to not have a well, 50 years in a career at one company is long gone, right? That you don't work 50 years, get a gold watch, retirement party. That has kind of gone. So I don't know about you, but I've been through, I don't know, 5 or 6 different major pivots in my career, earning money, putting food in my mouth. Um, so the extension of that is that more people are primarily in a free agent role and then
Mm.
temporarily aligned. And we've seen this certainly in the pandemic too. There were a lot of communities that formed the um, digital virtual, the design sprints,
Mhm.
global virtual design sprint, and certain communities just came together. They even crowdsourced what are the problems that we should be focusing on, and very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but for a consultant, if you are consulting with 2 auto manufacturers, you have to keep the data separate, right? If
Mm.
you're consulting with Toyota and Mercedes, you can't have one central AI being, informed.
Yes. Yes.
So again,
Complex.
just acknowledging it is
Yeah.
complex data privacy and security, but
Yeah. And I just realized that I left a thread there and suddenly it was there. So I want to pick it up again about the how to craft the invitations or the prompts and how important that is. The simple things that are actually so difficult. The one question that can keep a team busy for a year. And I realized that this is one of the underestimated facilitation superpower. When you said consulting is on the rise, I have the impression facilitation is on the rise, and
the
more call themselves facilitators. And what I hear very often is, oh, the ideas are not good enough. They're not engaged enough. And I think we often don't spend enough time to really craft the right prompt.
um, I would agree. Or we don't spend enough time becoming steeped in our market or our customers or
Mm.
empathizing in a way where we can evaluate whether or not that prompt is one that matters. Very seldom are you in a company building a product for the people in the company. Mural's a little strange like that because we're building a thing that we use to
Mhm.
talk about and build the thing and organize ourselves. Um, so that's an interesting case, but in most times companies are building something for use by another population, and that naturally can create a division where inside people know what they know, or they know the process that they were hired into, and but they don't have necessarily a broader appreciation for what makes a difference for the people that are consuming the product. People in support do. They answer the phone 24 hours a day, and they can tell you exactly, but does that information make it back? So when you have a challenge statement, you know, people on the inside go, sounds good. They're oftentimes saying, sounds like that might be profitable,
Mm.
but it'll only be profitable if it makes sense to the people that you're trying to
Yeah.
deliver it to. And so I think that's the statement craft is definitely takes work, but it's also the people inside the company being more engaged and aware of the role, mission, value.
And now I totally understand, maybe a bit late, why design UX designers are such good facilitators because you grew up with that, right? That's what you were
Right.
trained for. And then it's only picking up on the methods and do the inner work. But this core skill is there. Um, yeah.
You you definitely you get the warm fuzzies of seeing solving a problem for a person other than yourself or someone on your team, and and so you have that positive reinforcement of the behaviors that create conditions where you understand the customer better. And that definitely
Yeah.
factor.
Yeah. After all these years, what remains your facilitation challenge?
Um, so I think there's still some fundamental frontiers for me. I think dealing with really abrupt conflict. I mean, there's some situations. I know people that facilitate. They really facilitate. They go into social situations and realms where people are in crisis and everything. I think um, most of my career I've been working with companies, and that doesn't come up very much. But as VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity is on the rise, isolation, loneliness, mental health issues, like these things are creeping up more and more and more in a way where um, I think for me, facilitation is leaning a bit more into that the generosity of the space that people might not be showing up here with a fully formed Maslow's hierarchy of they ate, they
Mm.
got plenty of sleep, they feel socially connected, they're self-actualized, fully formed human beings ready to do amazing work. It's really appreciating the fact that that there you need to be generous in creating that opportunity. And people that have approached me and said, "Oh, I like to be a facilitator and it looks so fun." I go, well, the one thing I'd share with you is even how we started our conversation this morning is how are you doing? Don't ask that question unless you have the skill to land an airplane that might be in crisis if someone is not okay, right? So that's in its respect. It will almost never show up, but when it does, you need that's part of the work that I continually work on is the ability to be ready to follow through with empathy on something that may show up unexpectedly. And because I think the propensity for that to happen is on the rise.
Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. And thank you for this example of of the question, how are you? And and that was for me something beautiful during the pandemic because suddenly the question, how are you, got some weight because everyone had a story to tell. Nobody was really good. So everyone took time to really answer. And I have the impression we lost that again. Unfortunately, we forgot. And I have the impression that there's a kind of regular self-regulatory mechanism where those who can hold space for the real answer, they ask the how are you in a different way. Then, hey, how are you doing?
Mhm.
As opposed to how are you? And then suddenly there's a pause and there's an invitation in the words. As you asked me before, I'm like, "Ah, let me think about that for a moment.
Yeah. How
Let me
am
give
I?
you the real answer. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I think yeah, it's all of a piece. Businesses need to if you want a paycheck from the business you're working on, you can't spend all your meetings talking about all the things that are existentially freaking you out, right? You need to find some balance. But I think there's that, again, the human in the equation, the humanity, the the best work that any organization can hope to get out of their people is when the people feel uh, that that they matter
Yeah.
or that they're listened to. And so I think you just weave that in. That's one of the beauties of facilitation is you're never not present to some extent of the human dynamic.
Hmm.
You're trying to get these outcomes. And sometimes you may just need to ask everyone, we need to stay on. You need to be a conductor.
Yes.
You need to say, look, this is for your own good, but parking lot this thing and let's find some time to unpack that because that actually deserves its own space. And you have these ways of acknowledging it and not
Mm.
way, but also not letting it get in the way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's the beauty of online facilitation and breakout rooms. I had a phase where I started meetings with the question. I sent them in breakout rooms for 5 minutes and asked the question, how are you really? That's it. And they all came back with just, after 5 minutes, it was over. And it was clear that for everyone's over, everyone's brought back. But they had this kind of centering um, to just share for 5 minutes with one other person. Total game changer.
and you've reminded me of something I learned last weekend in a kite making workshop of all things. I I signed us up for our anniversary, and we were hemming and hawing. Do we want to go? I don't know. But we went and learned how to make kites. That was great, getting back in the physical. But our instructor, who's Peruvian, shared something that really stood out as a facilitator. And he was talking about taking a ceramics course with a leading, like globally renowned ceramicist. And so the first day we came in and she just said, have fun, throw some clay on the wheel, and get your hands in there. And so first 2 hour class, you're just sitting there playing. And he
Figure it
said, then
out.
back in the second day, and she goes, now we get to work. And what what she had done is allowed people to get outside of their head about what they think a ceramics class is going to be and instantly get their physical body engaged with the material, with the wheel, with tools. And in that play, now they have an informed point of view to say, okay, now I'm willing to listen. And when you say you started in this way, have an embodied sense what that is. And I think that that is the best argument for starting almost any activity that involves something new with play, like intentional play. That is the biggest argument. And it goes for mural or sketching or trying to write a paper or anything. Anything that you would do is just play.
Mm.
And once you embody that environment, you'll come back and say, how does this thing work? Or, I wanted to indent something in this tool and I couldn't figure out how. And
You create curiosity.
you create that
That's
curiosity.
exactly that. You facilitate you basically, yeah, there's no way not to be curious how it works when you have failed for 2 hours and you have tried to do something and the clay kind of jumped off the wheel.
And
You're
you
all
see
muddy.
someone else trying something. Oh, I didn't think about using the tool that way. And
Yeah.
it was that moment of insight that's the journey is waiting, months and months and sometimes years where you're just kind of going along and then you never know that the putting yourself into new situations and having a new spark for your practice and take that back in and work with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think coming back to what we shared earlier about the spinach in the teeth, the ceramic star who comes in, and then everyone is might be almost too scared and they look carefully what they're doing and they want to replicate and nobody is good enough. And then to just to overcome this hesitation, to just get literally the hands dirty.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then being, yeah, I think looking at the teacher then differently than as if
That's right.
Because also I can imagine that through this play and just doing, there's more connection between the participants that they would, as you said, look, oh, what are you doing? Oh, that looks great. Let me try that. And otherwise, all the eyes are on the instructor, and there's nothing happening between the group.
That's right. And I've, uh, it's a generalization, but I've often found instructors, teachers, lecturers that are very rigid actually have some sense of uncertainty and fear, or it's a very rigid way of being where they don't answer questions if it's outside the thing, and they don't like, and and as a student you might believe that that's because they are the expert and they know and you're being stupid and that was a dumb question.
Imposter. It's
Sometimes
imposter
it's
syndrome.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's and they've been reading the same lecture notes for 20 years and they haven't grown at all. And I think that was another aspect of that starting with play is inviting you in to that expert's domain
Yeah.
and saying, I'm welcoming you in, and I can, now that you have taken that first step, I can take you on some other steps.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I'm currently taking a ceramics class, so this is very.
Timely, yeah.
Yes. What is it that you would have wished you had known before when you just started off as a facilitator?
Uh, I wish at the very beginning of my career, I had that insight that you don't have to have the answers. In fact, it's silly to think that you do have all the answers.
Mhm.
And that freedom from certainty was probably one of the most profound moments um, where I could have, even through all of my schooling growing up, I could have engendered a more experimental space with all of my classmates and everything to let's give this a shot. Let's do, we none of us know. I mean, the
Mhm.
teacher may have an answer. They've got the guide with the answers and the side of the book. They have the answers, but I think that's something I could have spent a lot less time worrying about trying to attain knowledge that I couldn't possibly attain in a short amount of time to be the authority to, my whole model of the value that I was able to offer was out of whack. Um, so that's probably something that I would have appreciated. But then again, you don't learn those lessons until you're ready to learn them. So
Yeah.
it happened when it happened.
And thinking back of the ceramics teacher and the expert who doesn't allow questions, I'm wondering, I'm thinking out loud because I often hear that, and I'm actually making up this thought the first time now, that imagine you had known that before, that you don't have to have all the answers. So you step into your first facilitation workshop. I don't need to have all the answers. You guys do it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think the embodiment of this, of the um, confidence that you don't need to have all the answers, or even more important, the confidence that the room has the answers. And I think this is something that we need to learn because, yes, everyone says that the people have the answers, but to really trust that this is true takes some sessions and years under our belt. And only then we can actually embody that
You're
we don't need
absolutely
to have
right.
that.
You're absolutely right. The life will continually present opportunities to learn, but sometimes you're just you're not ready to see it or you can't perceive it. And to your point, the going in at the very beginning, my first facilitation, I absolutely needed to prepare and really work like crazy to make sure that I understood all of the moment by moment like getting lists of people's names. I'm not very good with names, so I'm trying to run through and say the names out loud so they're more on the tip of my tongue. And all of that prep work is so foundational to get the confidence to be able to go through those first experiences, but you still need the tools. You can't walk in and say, I don't know anything about this, and then what? We're just going to sit around and
Wow.
chat? Or like what you have to got there's something you're bringing,
Yeah.
but I don't have to. Why bring all the methods to get them to share their ideas if you're the one that's just going to tell them what they should do anyway? I mean, that's I think
It's
the
it.
the
Yeah.
shit. Like
Yeah.
just let go of having that answer and really embrace helping them ask better questions.
Yes. And not taking ourselves too serious, not being these experts who don't allow questions because, yeah, doesn't help.
Yeah, I know what I know, and you're paying me for what I know, or we're engaging, or I'm happy to help with what I know. But there's stuff you know that I don't know. And so that's what we're doing here is getting the stuff that you know out, and I'm helping you make sense out of it and take action based on insights
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
over and over again.
Beautiful. And that's what I'm trying with the podcast, getting everything out of you that you know so that we
happy
can all learn from it.
happy to share. Oh,
Beautiful. Thank you. We've spoken for more than an hour. Um, is there anything that you would have wanted to share that we didn't touch on yet?
um, I think this has been a very it feels like a very round conversation. You know, I didn't come in with expectations, but as you say, threads show up
Mm,
as the conversations happen, and I don't feel that there is a moment or a thread that we left dangling. Feels very kind of very smooth, very contained. Thank you. You hold space really well. I appreciate
thank you. It
being able
was
to
a
this way.
wonderful conversation, and I don't know where time went.
Me either.
Thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome.